The girl with worn-out shoes and a backpack full of unpaid bills just gave her last 1,000 naira to a man sitting on the pavement. She had no idea that same morning he signed a 10 billion naira contract. Elizabeth Amadi was a final-year architecture student who couldn't afford her own tuition. Joseph Adeyemi was the CEO who owned half the buildings in the city, including the university threatening to expel her. But when she saw him sitting there on the cold concrete, all she saw was someone who needed help. Someone invisible to the rest of the world rushing past. She didn't see a business mogul. She saw a human being. And that one choice, that single moment of seeing what everyone else refused to see, would change both their lives forever. This is the story of what happens when kindness meets the one person who has the power to change everything. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Let's see how far this story travels. Now let's continue. The rain started the way it always did in Lagos during the rainy season. A few drops, then a wall of water that turned the streets into rivers within minutes. Elizabeth stood outside Adeyemi Tower, staring at the glass building that reached into the gray sky. Her university's final payment notice was crumpled in her fist. 48 hours to pay 87,000 Nigerian nairas or lose her spot in the graduating class. 4 years of sacrifice, gone. She'd already sold her laptop. Her phone was 2 generations old. The soles of her shoes had been glued back together 3 times. The building's lobby was full of people in expensive suits, carrying leather briefcases, talking on iPhones. She watched a woman in Gucci heels step into a Mercedes S-Class that pulled up to the curb. The woman didn't even look at the man sitting on the pavement beside the building's entrance. But Elizabeth did. He was huddled under a dirty tarp that did nothing against the rain. His beard was unkempt, streaked with gray. His hands, calloused and weathered, held the tarp closed around his shoulders. His clothes were clean but worn thin, the kind of clean that came from washing the same shirt over and over in a bucket because you couldn't afford a washing machine. Elizabeth recognized that kind of clean. She'd been washing her clothes in a bucket for 3 years. The rain soaked through her denim vest. Her backpack, stuffed with borrowed textbooks she couldn't afford to buy, grew heavier. She had 2 slices of bread left in her room. A sachet of groundnuts. Half a bottle of Coke from yesterday. That was dinner tonight and breakfast tomorrow. But the man on the pavement was shivering. Elizabeth opened her small umbrella and walked over to him. She crouched down so they were at eye level. His eyes, dark and tired, met hers with surprise. Most people didn't look at him at all. "Uncle," she said softly, using the term of respect for an elder. "The night is too cold. Come, I have a small fire and something to eat." He stared at her. "You don't know me." "I don't need to know you to see you're human," Elizabeth said. "Please, let me help." Before he could respond, a black Range Rover came flying down the street, music blasting from the open windows. It hit a massive puddle and sent a spray of muddy water over both of them. Elizabeth gasped as the cold, dirty water soaked her completely. The SUV screeched to a stop. 3 students from her university leaned out the windows, laughing. Kayamika, the daughter of a state governor, held up her phone, recording. Her friend Tun shouted, "Elizabeth, you finally found a boyfriend. The campus charity case has a new project." Kayamika's laugh was sharp. "Should we send this to the dean? I'm sure he'd love to see what kind of people you bring around the university." The SUV sped off, their laughter trailing behind them. Elizabeth's face burned. She could feel the man beside her tense, ready to leave so she wouldn't have to be embarrassed further. That made her angrier than anything Kayamika had said. She stood up and held out her hand to him. "My name is Elizabeth Amadi. Please, come with me." He looked at her hand for a long time. Then he took it. His grip was firm despite the tremor in his fingers. "Joseph," he said quietly. "Joseph Adeyemi. It's good to meet you, Uncle Joseph." They walked together through the rain, sharing her small umbrella. Elizabeth's room was a 20-minute walk. She couldn't afford the bus fare most days. She lived in a compound behind the university, a single room she shared with 2 other girls who were out tonight. The ceiling leaked in one corner. The walls were cracked. But it was home. She unlocked the door and gestured for Joseph to enter. He hesitated at the threshold, looking at the cramped space, 3 mattresses on the floor, a hot plate in the corner, textbooks stacked against the wall, architectural drawings pinned everywhere. "Please," Elizabeth said. "Sit. I'll make us some tea." Joseph sat on the floor, not on any of the mattresses she noticed, but on the bare concrete by the door. Like he didn't want to take up space. Like he thought he didn't deserve comfort. Elizabeth plugged in the hot plate and put water on to boil. She split her 2 slices of bread in half, spread a thin layer of margarine on them, and arranged them on a plastic plate. It looked like nothing. It was nothing. But it was everything she had. She handed him the plate and a cup of tea. "Sorry, it's not much." Joseph looked down at the bread. His jaw tightened. When he looked up at her, his eyes were wet. "Why?" he asked. "You have so little. Why share it with me?" Elizabeth sat down across from him. The rain drummed on the metal roof. Outside, car horns blared and generators hummed. Inside it was quiet. "My father used to say something," Elizabeth said. "He said we measure a person not by what they have, but by what they give when they have nothing left to give." She smiled, though it hurt. "He died when I was 12. Left us with nothing but that wisdom." Joseph was silent for a long time. Then he picked up the bread and took a bite. "Your father was a wise man," he said. They ate together in silence, 2 people with nothing, sharing everything. Elizabeth fell asleep around midnight, exhausted from a double shift at the campus cafeteria before she'd found Joseph. She curled up on her mattress, still wearing her damp clothes, too tired to change. Joseph sat against the wall, wide awake. Sleep didn't come easy anymore. Hadn't since Folktales died 2 years ago. The silence of the room pressed against him differently than the silence of the streets. Out there, he was invisible. Here he was seen. It made his chest tight. His eyes drifted to the architectural drawings pinned on the wall above Elizabeth's mattress. Even in the dim light from the street lamp outside, he could see them clearly. A low-cost housing project. Her final year thesis. He stood up slowly, his knees protesting. Moved closer to study the drawings. The concept was beautiful. Modular housing units that could be expanded as families grew. Rainwater harvesting systems. Cross-ventilation to reduce electricity costs. She designed for people who lived the way she lived. People who counted every naira. But the execution had problems. Joseph's fingers traced the structural lines without touching the paper. The load-bearing walls were positioned wrong. The foundation calculations didn't account for Lagos's soil composition. The seasonal flooding would compromise the entire structure within 5 years. The roof pitch was too shallow for the weight of the solar panels she'd sketched in. He recognized the red ink in the margins. Her professor's comments were brutal. Structural integrity questionable. Foundation design fails basic safety standards. Resubmit or fail. Joseph found Elizabeth's pencil case on the floor beside a stack of borrowed textbooks. Advanced Structural Engineering, Urban Planning in Developing Nations, Sustainable Architecture. All from the university library, due dates stamped on the inside covers. She couldn't afford to buy them. He pulled out a mechanical pencil and an eraser. For 20 minutes, he stood there, making tiny adjustments. He shifted a wall 6 inches to the left. Deepened the foundation by 30 centimeters and added drainage channels. Adjusted the roof pitch by 3 degrees. Changed the rebar specifications in the margins. Small corrections that would make the difference between a building that stood and one that collapsed. His wife had been an architect. Folktales had spent 15 years designing community centers and schools in neighborhoods where most firms wouldn't bother to bid. She used to stay up late like this, obsessing over drawings, erasing and redrawing the same corner until it was perfect. "The details are where buildings either serve people or fail them," she'd say, tapping her pencil against the paper. "The difference between safe and sorry is usually half an inch, and the willingness to care about that half inch." She died on her way to a site inspection. A truck driver fell asleep at the wheel on the Lagos-Ibadan expressway. The doctors said it was instant. Joseph had buried himself in work for a year, signing contracts he barely read, attending meetings where he couldn't remember what was discussed. Then one morning he'd looked at the Adeyemi Tower, his name in chrome letters 40 stories high, and felt nothing but emptiness. So he'd walked away from it all. Given his board of directors temporary control, told his assistant he needed time, and disappeared into the streets of Lagos. 6 months living as the invisible man he'd felt like since Folktales died. Until tonight. Until a broke student with nothing had shared everything. Joseph studied Elizabeth's drawing again. The design was ambitious. Naive in places, yes, but the core idea was sound. More than sound, it was brilliant. She designed a home that could grow with a family's dreams, not just their budget. The kind of project Folktales would have loved. He made 3 more corrections, then stopped himself. If he fixed too much, it wouldn't be her work anymore. The skill had to be hers. He was just removing the obstacles that poverty had put in her way, the inability to afford CD software to test load distributions, the lack of money for engineering textbooks that explained soil composition, the exhaustion from working 2 jobs that made her miss the details. He put the pencil back exactly where he'd found it. Elizabeth stirred in her sleep, mumbling something about foundation depth. Even unconscious, she was still working. Joseph pulled the thin blanket from the foot of her mattress and laid it over her carefully. On the floor beside her bed was a framed photo. Elizabeth and an older man with the same eyes, standing in front of a half-built house. Her father, Prof. The man had his arm around her shoulders and they were both covered in cement dust, grinning at the camera. The house behind them looked like it had been built with more love than money. Next to the photo was a Nokia phone so old it still had physical buttons. The screen was cracked. She'd wrapped clear tape around it to keep the pieces together. Joseph picked up his own phone from his pocket, an iPhone 15 Pro Max he'd been carrying when he left the office 6 months ago. The battery had died weeks ago. He'd stopped charging it. Stopped checking emails. Stopped being CO Joseph Adeyemi, the man whose signature moved billions. But he was still an architect. That part of him Folktales had shaped and sharpened over 15 years couldn't be turned off just because he was wearing torn clothes instead of Tom Ford suits. He looked at Elizabeth's drawing one more time. She'd calculated the cost per unit in the margin, 847,000 Nigerian nairas. Less than what some people spent on a Rolex. She'd written beneath it, "Everyone deserves a home, not just shelter." Folktales used to say the exact same thing. Joseph returned to his spot against the wall and closed his eyes. Outside, a bus rumbled past. A generator coughed to life down the street. The ceiling leak in the corner dripped steadily into a plastic bucket. For the first time in 2 years, Joseph felt something other than empty. He felt purpose. Elizabeth woke up to find her architectural drawings spread across the floor. Someone had made corrections in pencil, small adjustments she hadn't noticed before. She picked up the main structural sheet and squinted at the changes. The foundation depth was different. The load-bearing walls had shifted slightly. Even the roof pitch had been altered. She looked at Joseph, still asleep against the wall, and her throat tightened. He'd done this while she slept. An old man who'd been living on the streets had fixed her failing thesis. Before she could process what that meant, her phone buzzed. A text from the university bursar's office. Final notice. Payment due by 5 p.m. today or your registration will be terminated. No exceptions. Elizabeth's hands shook as she typed out a reply asking for an extension. The response came back in 30 seconds. Request denied. Pay or withdraw. She had 3,400 Nigerian nairas in her bank account. She needed 87,000 Nigerian nairas. Her roommate Ngozi had left a note on the hot plate. Elizabeth, I moved out. My uncle found me a place closer to 6. Sorry I couldn't say goodbye. You're too good for this world and it's going to break you. Elizabeth crumpled the note. Ngozi was the 3rd roommate to leave this year. They all said the same thing eventually, that Elizabeth gave too much, cared too much, sacrificed too much. That she'd burn herself out trying to save everyone else. Maybe they were right. She reached under her mattress and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was her mother's gold ring, simple, elegant, with a tiny diamond that caught the morning light. Her mother had worn it every single day until the breast cancer took her 4 years ago. On her deathbed, she'd pressed it into Elizabeth's palm and whispered, "For your graduation day. Or for when you really need it." Elizabeth had checked the pawn shops before. The ring would get her 95,000 Nigerian nairas, maybe 100,000 Nigerian nairas if she bargained well. Enough to pay her fees and have a little left over. She was putting the ring in her pocket when Joseph started coughing. It wasn't a normal cough. It was deep and wet, the kind that sounded like it came from somewhere dark in his chest. He tried to muffle it with his hand, but his whole body shook with the effort. "Uncle Joseph?" Elizabeth knelt beside him. His forehead was burning. "How long have you been sick?" "It's nothing," he said, his voice rough. "Just a cold." "That's not a cold." Elizabeth pressed her hand to his forehead again. "The fever was dangerously high. We need to get you to a hospital." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. Please let me." "I said I'm fine." Joseph's voice cracked. Then quieter, "I can't afford a hospital, Elizabeth. And neither can you." She thought about the ring in her pocket. Thought about her mother's face, proud and hopeful, pressing it into her hand. "For your graduation day." But her mother had also taught her something else. She'd spent her final months volunteering at the General Hospital in Yaba, helping other cancer patients navigate their treatment, even when she could barely walk. "We're not here to just survive," she'd said. "We're here to make sure others survive too." Elizabeth stood up. "Get dressed. We're going to the pharmacy." "Elizabeth." "I'm not asking." The pharmacy was a 15-minute walk. Joseph could barely make it. He leaned heavily on her shoulder, stopping every few steps to catch his breath. People stared as they passed, a young woman in a worn denim vest supporting an old man in torn clothes. A Mercedes SLK drove past and someone shouted, "Get him off the road." At the pharmacy, the attendant looked at Joseph and frowned. "Chest infection," she said after Elizabeth described his symptoms. "Probably pneumonia. He needs antibiotics. Augmentin 1,000 milligrams, twice daily for 10 days. How much?" 8,500 Nigerian nairas for the full course. Plus 4,200 Nigerian nairas for the cough syrup. 12,700 Nigerian nairas total. Elizabeth felt the ring press against her thigh through her pocket. She pulled out her debit card instead. "Can you split the payment?" "I don't have it all right now." The attendant's expression softened. "Pay what you have. Bring the rest tomorrow." Elizabeth paid 3,400 Nigerian nairas, everything in her account. The screen showed her new balance, 0 Nigerian nairas. Outside, Joseph grabbed her arm. "What did you just do?" "I bought medicine." "That was your school fees money, wasn't it?" Elizabeth wouldn't look at him. "You need to get better." "I'm nobody, Elizabeth. I'm just." "You're not nobody." She turned on him, angry tears burning her eyes. "You're not nobody to me. You fixed my drawings. You saw what I was trying to build and you helped me. That's not nothing." Joseph stared at her. The morning sun caught the silver in his beard. For a second, he looked like someone else entirely, someone powerful and important wearing a disguise. "Your education will still be there next semester." Elizabeth handed him the white paper bag from the pharmacy. "But if I let you die because I was too selfish to help, I'll never be able to look at myself again." She started walking back to the compound. Joseph followed slowly, clutching the bag of medicine like it was something precious. That afternoon, Elizabeth went to the pawn shop on Allen Avenue. The man behind the counter examined her mother's ring under a jeweler's loupe. 98,000 Nigerian nairas. Final offer. She looked at the ring one last time. Remembered her mother's hands, always busy, always helping, always choosing people over possessions. "I'll take it," Elizabeth whispered. The man counted out the money in 1,000 Nigerian nairas notes. Elizabeth folded them into her bag and walked to the university bursar's office. She paid her fees with 1 minute to spare before the 5 p.m. deadline. When she got back to the compound, Joseph was sitting up, the fever already breaking from the antibiotics. He looked at her face and knew immediately what she'd done. "Elizabeth. Don't." She sat down heavily on her mattress. "Please don't." They sat in silence as the sun set outside the window, two people who'd given everything they had, wondering if it would ever be enough. 3 days after Elizabeth sold her mother's ring, She received an email from the university's disciplinary committee. Subject line, Mandatory Appearance Code of Conduct Violation. She read it twice, her hands going numb. They wanted her in the dean's conference room at 2 p.m. The charge, conduct unbecoming of a university student, bringing disrepute to the institution through association with vagrant individuals on campus grounds. Kayamika had made good on her threat. Elizabeth showed Joseph the email. He was recovering well, the antibiotics had worked. The cough was nearly gone. But when he read the message, something changed in his face. A hardness she hadn't seen before. "Don't go," he said. "I have to. If I don't show up, they'll expel me anyway." "Elizabeth." "It's fine." She smiled, but it felt like her face might crack. "I'm used to being looked down on. One more time won't kill me." Joseph stood up. For the first time since she'd met him, he stood completely straight. He was taller than she'd realized. "What time is the meeting?" 2 o'clock. "Why?" "I need to make a phone call." He pulled out his dead iPhone. "Can I borrow your charger?" Elizabeth handed him her Nokia charger. "That won't fit your..." Joseph was already walking out the door. At 1:45 p.m., Elizabeth arrived at the administrative building wearing her best outfit, a faded black skirt and the same denim vest from the night she'd met Joseph. She tried to cover the stains with a scarf. It didn't work. The dean's conference room was on the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the campus. A massive mahogany table dominated the space. 7 people sat around it: the dean, 3 board members, the university's legal counsel, and Kayamika with her father, Senator Okonkwo, chairman of the university's board of trustees. Kayamika wore a white Chanel suit. Her father's Patek Philippe watch caught the light as he gestured dismissively at Elizabeth. "Sit," the dean said, not looking up from his iPad. Elizabeth sat in the single chair facing the panel. It felt like a trial. It was a trial. Senator Okonkwo spoke first. "Miss Amadi, this university has a reputation to maintain. Our students come from respectable families. They represent the best of Nigerian society. With all due respect, sir, I work 3 jobs to afford." "We're aware of your financial situation," the dean interrupted. "That's not the issue. The issue is that you were filmed bringing a homeless man onto university property, creating a scene that was viewed over 50,000 times on social media. Parents are concerned about safety. He wasn't dangerous. He was sleeping in your dormitory." This from Kayamika, her voice dripping with fake concern. "We have rules about unauthorized visitors for everyone's protection." Elizabeth's nails dug into her palms. "He had nowhere else to go." "That's not your problem to solve," Senator Okonkwo said. "This university invested in you through a partial scholarship. You've repaid that investment by embarrassing us. We're voting to terminate your enrollment effective immediately." The room tilted. Elizabeth gripped the edge of the table. "Please. I'm 2 months from graduating. I've worked 4 years for this. I'll apologize, I'll do community service, The decision is made." The dean finally looked at her. His eyes were cold. "You can collect your transcripts from the registrar's office tomorrow." "You can't do this." "We can and we are." Senator Okonkwo stood up. "This meeting is..." The conference room door swung open. 12 men in identical black suits walked in. They moved like a military unit, forming 2 lines along the walls. Each one carried a leather briefcase embossed with gold letters, "Adeyemi and Associates, Legal Counsel." Then Joseph walked in. Except he didn't look like Joseph anymore. His beard was trimmed close. His hair was freshly cut. He wore a charcoal Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than Elizabeth's entire year of tuition. A gold Rolex Presidential gleamed on his wrist. His shoes, Italian leather, polished to a mirror shine, clicked against the marble floor. But it was his eyes that had changed the most. They weren't tired anymore. They were sharp, calculating. The eyes of a man who'd built an empire from nothing and had no patience for fools. The dean's face went white. "Mr. Adeyemi, we weren't expecting..." "No, you weren't." Joseph's voice was different too. Authoritative. the voice of someone used to being obeyed. But here I am. Senator Okonkwo stepped forward, hand extended. Sir, it's an honor. If we'd known you were coming. Joseph ignored the hand. He walked directly to Elizabeth and pulled out the chair beside her. Sat down. Continue your meeting. Don't let me interrupt. The room was silent. You could hear the air conditioning humming. The dean cleared his throat. We were just discussing Miss Amati's disciplinary case. I know what you were discussing. I've been living in her dormitory for the past week. Kayamika gasped. Her father's face turned red. You're the dean couldn't finish the sentence. The vagrant? Yes. Joseph leaned back in his chair. The man your student brought into her home when I had nowhere else to go. The man she fed when she had almost nothing. The man she bought medicine for using money meant for her education. He pulled a folder from one of his lawyers and slid it across the table. That's a copy of the check Miss Amati wrote to your bursar's office 3 days ago. She paid her fees in full, which means she's in good standing. You have no grounds to expel her. The conduct violations, Senator Okonkwo started. What violations? Joseph's voice could have cut glass. Helping someone in need? Showing basic human decency? If that violates your code of conduct, perhaps your code needs revision. He stood up. Every person in the room stood with him, including Elizabeth, who felt like she was watching this happen to someone else. Gentlemen, Joseph said, looking at each board member in turn. And I use that term loosely. This meeting is over. If I hear one more word about expelling Miss Amati, I will personally ensure that every construction project, every research grant, every corporate partnership this university has with Adeyemi Group and our subsidiary companies is terminated immediately. Are we clear? The dean nodded so hard Elizabeth thought his head might fall off. Joseph offered Elizabeth his arm. Shall we? She took it, still in shock, as they walked out together past 12 lawyers who fell into formation behind them like an honor guard. The door closed on Senator Okonkwo's speechless face. They didn't speak until they reached the parking lot. A black Mercedes-Maybach S-Class waited at the curb, driver holding the door open. Elizabeth stopped walking. I can't get in that car. Joseph turned to her. Why not? Because I don't know you. Her voice shook. I thought I did. I thought you were Uncle Joseph, the man who fixed my drawings and drank tea on my floor. But you're not. I'm both. Joseph dismissed the lawyers with a wave. They dispersed to separate vehicles, engines starting in sequence. The man in the suit is the mask I wear for boardrooms. The man you met on the street is who I became after my wife died. Elizabeth wrapped her arms around herself. Students were staring from the campus quad. Phones were out, recording. By tonight, she'd be viral again, but this time as the girl who'd unknowingly housed a billionaire. Was it a test? She asked. Did you come to my door to see if I'd pass some kind of? No. Joseph's voice cracked. I came to your door because I was cold and wet and you were the first person in 6 months to look at me like I was human. He sat down on the concrete steps leading to the parking lot. After a moment, Elizabeth sat beside him. The driver stayed by the car, giving them space. My wife, Folake, she was an architect, Joseph said. Not the kind who designs shopping malls for rich people. She built schools in Ajigunal, community centers in Makoko, places where people like you grew up. Elizabeth remembered the corrections on her drawings. The precision. The care. She died 2 years ago. Car accident. Joseph stared at his hands. I threw myself into work. Signed contracts worth billions. Built Adeyemi Tower, 40 stories of glass and steel with my name on top. And I felt nothing. Empty. Like I was signing papers for someone else's life. A bus rumbled past on the main road. The smell of suya drifted from a vendor's stand nearby. So I walked away, Joseph continued. Left my assistant in charge. Left my penthouse in Ikoyi. Started sleeping on the streets because at least there, when people ignored me, it was honest. They weren't pretending to care because I could sign their paychecks. Until I came along. Until you came along. Joseph looked at her. You gave me bread when you had nothing. You sold your mother's ring to buy me medicine. You didn't do it for a reward. You did it because your father taught you that character is the only currency that doesn't lose value when everything else crashes. Elizabeth's eyes burned. You heard that? I hear everything. He smiled sadly. It's amazing what people say when they think you're nobody. They sat in silence. Elizabeth picked at a thread on her vest. The same vest she'd been wearing for 3 years. The same vest she'd probably wear for 3 more if she graduated and couldn't find a job because architecture firms wanted people with connections, with internship experience at fancy companies, with parents who knew senators. What happens now? She asked. Joseph pulled an envelope from his suit pocket. 3 days ago, I made a phone call. Had my assistant pull your academic records, your thesis proposal, everything. Your professor submitted your revised drawings for the Vice Chancellor's Excellence Award. You won. Elizabeth's head snapped up. What? The corrections I made, they were minimal. The brilliance was already there. You just needed someone to show you the blind spots. He handed her the envelope. But that's not why I'm here. Inside was a single key card. Embossed with gold lettering, Adeyemi and Partners, Lead Architect, Community Development Division. I don't understand. I'm hiring you, Joseph said. Not as a favor. Not as charity. As the lead architect for the new General Hospital expansion in Yaba. 200 million naira project. Low-cost patient housing, family accommodation, community health center. Elizabeth couldn't breathe. I haven't even graduated yet. You will. In 2 months. Your thesis is already approved. I spoke to your department head this morning. Joseph stood up, offering his hand to help her up. The job starts when you graduate. Until then you're on retainer. 200,000 Nigerian nairas per month to finish your studies without working 3 jobs. I can't accept this. Why not? Because I didn't earn it. You're only offering because I helped you. I'm offering because you designed affordable housing that could actually work. Because you understand that architecture isn't about monuments to ego, it's about dignity. It's about giving people a home, not just shelter. Joseph's voice was firm. Folktales used to say a city is only as strong as its weakest resident. You proved you understand that the night you brought me into your home. Elizabeth looked at the key card in her hand. Her mother's face flashed in her mind, proud, hopeful, pressing that ring into her palm. For your graduation day. My mother's ring, she whispered. Can you? Already done. Joseph pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. I bought it back from the pawn shop yesterday. Added a second stone, my wife's diamond. 2 women who understood what it means to build something that lasts. Elizabeth opened the box. The ring gleamed, now flanked by a larger diamond that caught the afternoon sun. She wanted to cry, but her eyes were too dry from shock. I don't know what to say. Say you'll take the job. Say you'll build the kind of projects Folktales would have been proud of. Say you'll prove that your father was right, that character is the only thing that matters when everything else falls apart. Elizabeth slipped her mother's ring onto her finger. The added diamond made it feel heavier, more permanent, like a promise she was making to herself as much as to Joseph. I'll take the job, she said. But I'm doing it my way. No shortcuts. No special treatment because you're my boss. Joseph smiled, really smiled, for the first time since she'd met him. I wouldn't want it any other way. They walked to the Mercedes together. Before getting in, Elizabeth turned back to look at the university. Students were still recording from the quad. Tomorrow, they'd call her lucky. They'd say she'd hit the jackpot. They wouldn't understand that luck had nothing to do with it. Her father had taught her that the way you treat people when they have nothing to offer you is the only true measure of who you are. She'd measured herself and passed. Now it was time to build something that would outlast them both.